Plot a new course today. Governor General Julie Payette will deliver the throne speech to open a new session of Parliament. The address will lay out in broad strokes the Liberal government's plan to combat the coronavirus. Tom Perry reports.
The ceremony may be more subdued than last time, the guest list more limited, as Governor General Julie Payette delivers a throne speech for extraordinary times. The federal government looking to focus on some broad themes: controlling the spread of COVID-19, supporting workers and businesses through the pandemic, and laying the groundwork for rebuilding with a focus on green investments.
With respect to what's in front of us now, I want to lay out some really clear priorities.
In a minority parliament, the Liberals will need the support of at least some opposition MPs. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has outlined two measures he wants to see to protect Canadian workers.
Extend CERB, put in place a new program that doesn't cut the help they receive, and make sure every Canadian has access to paid sick leave.
Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole and Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet have both tested positive for coronavirus and will not attend today's speech. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
After the throne speech, Prime Minister Trudeau will talk directly to Canadians in a rare national televised address at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. BC's provincial health officer says she has been threatened with death during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Bonnie Henry also says some of her staff have been targeted. Dan Burrett reports.
I've had to have security in my house. I've had death threats.
For months, Dr. Bonnie Henry has been the face of BC's fight against COVID-19. But it's taken a frightening toll. Speaking with the province's Lieutenant Governor and other women leaders at the Union of BC Municipalities Conference in Victoria, Henry says she has received praise for her work, but others have attacked her for her actions. Henry says she believes the attacks are partly because she is a woman in a prominent position, and some people feel comfortable targeting her in ways they may not target a man. Henry says now is the time to address it openly.
If we're going to bring up the next generation of diverse and confident leaders, we need to be able to talk about those things. We need to be able to make it not okay.
Police in Victoria, where Dr. Henry's office is based, say they are aware of threats against her, but cannot speak about any ongoing investigations. Dan Burrett, CBC News, Vancouver.
Post-tropical storm Teddy has now made landfall in Sheet Harbour, Nova Scotia, east of Halifax. It's already been dumping rain on the region for the past 12 hours. Powerful storm surges and heavy rain are expected in parts of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. The United States has surpassed 200,000 coronavirus deaths. Today, the government's top infectious disease expert will testify before a U.S. Senate committee on the Trump administration's response to the pandemic. Steve Futterman has more.
It could be a contentious session today as Dr. Anthony Fauci is set to appear and testify before a Senate hearing. It comes a day after the U.S. officially reached another tragic milestone.
The idea of 200,000 deaths is really very sobering and in some respects stunning.
Fauci will be joined at the hearing by two other high-profile U.S. medical officials, Dr. Robert Redfield, director of the Centers for Disease Control, and Dr. Stephen Hahn, head of the Food and Drug Administration. With the presidential election now just 41 days away, the administration's response remains a key campaign issue. Today's hearing, some of the experts are likely to be put in the uncomfortable position of weighing in on the president's coronavirus policies and response. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
And finally, Russian opposition leader Alexey Navalny has been released from a Berlin hospital. His doctors believe he was poisoned, and his supporters blame Russia, but the Kremlin denies the allegations. And that is your world this hour.
From CTV News at 7:24 a.m. today.
Hello, I'm Nicole Dubé from the CTV Newsroom in Winnipeg. Here are the top stories. Today's speech from the throne will be followed by an address to the nation from the Prime Minister. The Liberals are expected to lay out the plans to deal with the pandemic and Canada's road to recovery. In a rare address to the nation, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to ask Canadians to bear down again in the fight against COVID-19. Parts of Atlantic Canada are feeling the effects of Teddy this morning. Teddy is now a post-tropical storm, but it's still bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and pounding waves as it makes landfall. there are some power outages and school closures. Ontario's COVID-19 case count is now at its highest level since early May. The province says it's investing $70 million to develop a flu shot campaign, securing 5.1 million doses of the vaccine for the most at-risk residents first. Officials also say plans to improve COVID-19 testing, long-term care, hospital capacity, and a surgery backlog are coming. And if grocery shopping is hitting your wallet harder than usual, you're not alone. A new report from Dalhousie University shows the price of food has been steadily increasing, and the pandemic is only making it worse. The report says the price of an average basket of groceries has risen by around 240% over the last 20 years. For all the day's top stories and breaking news as it happens, tune to CTV News Channel or go online to ctvnews.ca. I'm Nicole Dubé.
From CNBC Tech Check at 5:12 p.m. yesterday.
Hey, I'm Deirdre Boza, and here's your Tuesday CNBC Tech Check. Media mogul Barry Diller weighing in on the TikTok deal. The Expedia and IAC chairman told CNBC Squawk Box that the impending deal is a, quote, crock and has become a, quote, political mishmash. President Trump approved Oracle and Walmart's partnered bid for minority stakes, but it still needs the approval of the Chinese government. Walmart announcing it will run a pilot project to deliver COVID-19 self-collection test kits with automated drones. The retailer is partnering with Quest Diagnostics and drone services provider DroneUp. The self-collection kits will be dropped off on driveways, front sidewalks, or backyards of homes. Earlier this month, Walmart piloted drone delivery of grocery and household products in North Carolina. And finally, Amazon is getting into the connected fitness space. It is teaming up with Echelon to build and sell the Prime Bike, a $500 spinning bike, very similar to Peloton's offering. Shares of Peloton fell on the news. Amazon, though, is just the latest player in big tech moving into the fitness space. Earlier this month, Apple announced its plans for Apple Fitness Plus. That's all from the West Coast for now. See you back here tomorrow.
From DW News Brief at 4 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Russian opposition leader Alexey Navalny has been discharged from the hospital in Berlin following treatment for an alleged poisoning attack. Doctors say a full recovery may be possible. Navalny was airlifted to Germany last month after becoming sick during a visit in Siberia. Germany is among several countries that have concluded he was poisoned by the Novichok nerve agent. Russia has said there is no evidence. More than 200,000 people in the United States have now died after testing positive for COVID-19. Flags were planted in front of the Washington Monument. The toll accounts for more than 1 in 5 deaths linked to coronavirus globally. It's also putting President Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic in the spotlight as he campaigns for a second term in office. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called on people to observe new coronavirus restrictions or risk a second lockdown. Johnson made the appeal in a televised address to the nation. Earlier, he announced that England would expand face mask requirements and impose stricter rules on social gatherings. This is DW News from Berlin. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DW News or visit our website, dw.com.
From Bloomberg First Word at 6:35 a.m. today.
Pressure is rising on UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak to set out how the government intends to protect jobs and businesses through the autumn and winter. The Treasury has spent over £100 billion on wage subsidies and business loans, but this is due to end in the next few weeks. Sunak has previously warned the current level of support is not sustainable. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is calling for further support for the U.S. economy, saying it has a long way to go before fully recovering from the pandemic. He made the comments during testimony to the House Financial Services Committee. Prospects for another round of fiscal stimulus have dimmed in recent days amid tensions over a replacement for Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping clashed during a virtual United Nations General Assembly meeting. The U.S. president used his speech to accuse Beijing of polluting the oceans and lying to the world about the coronavirus. His Chinese counterpart hit back, slamming leaders who tried to politicize the virus. Global News 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
I'll be right back, guys. Sorry.
Comes from the Financial Times, whose 2020 election coverage might be the best reporting that you are not reading right now. Or maybe you are reading it, in which case you can, like, skip ahead 52.
Whatever.
Where do... The fight to fill Ruth Bader Ginsburg's vacant seat on the Supreme Court began approximately a couple of hours after we got the news that she passed. It's now been a couple of days. Ian Millhiser, you cover the Supreme Court for Vox. Where do things stand now?
So, in the most superficial way, things are very ordinary right now. There's a vacancy on the Supreme Court. The president plans to nominate someone. There's a Senate that's controlled by the same party. The Senate is likely to confirm that person. There'll probably be a hearing. And so if you don't know anything about what has happened in the last 4 years, this could feel very normal. Of course, it's not normal, and the reason why it's not normal is that there's an election coming up, and 4 years ago the Republican Party was adamant, absolutely adamant, that there could not be a Supreme Court vacancy filled in an election year.
The American people are perfectly capable of having their say on this issue. So let's give them a voice. Let's let the American people decide. The Senate will appropriately revisit the matter when it considers the qualifications of the nominee the next president nominates, whoever that might be.
Right, and of course, the same Republican led the Senate then, who leads the Senate now. His name is Mitch McConnell, and he would not give Barack Obama an up or down vote on Merrick Garland in 2016 when Justice Antonin Scalia passed, but he seems happy to call a vote a few weeks away from this election. What is he saying about the, hypocrisy?
I mean, to the extent that they've tried to justify it at all.
President Obama was asking Senate Republicans for an unusual favor that had last been granted nearly 130 years before then. But voters had explicitly elected our majority to check and balance the end of his presidency. So we stuck with the basic norm.
Part of the mess that they've created for themselves is if 4 years ago when Justice Scalia died and President Obama named a replacement, if McConnell had just been honest then and just said, hey, we don't like you, Barack, we'd rather have Donald Trump pick the nominee and we've got the votes, so let me give you both middle fingers. Like, the reason he's in a bind this time, to the extent that he is in a bind, is because he told an obvious lie 4 years ago.
And, to what extent is he in a bind? Does he have enough of the party with him? I know people were holding out for Mitt, but now it looks like that's not going to work. I know he doesn't have Senator Collins from Maine and Senator Murkowski from Alaska. That's 2. How many does he need?
So Democrats need to flip 4 Republican senators to have a chance of blocking this nomination.
There's only one way for us to have some hope of coming together again, trusting each other again, lowering the temperature, moving forward. And that is for 4 brave Senate Republicans to commit to rejecting any nominee until the next president is installed.
It's very hard for Democrats to count to 4. I mean, maybe it'll happen, but when you look at the Senate, it is a mix of, there's some people who are running for re-election, but they're probably more concerned about their right wing and angering their base than they are with what Democrats are saying. You've got a few retiring senators. You know, some people originally fixated on Lamar Alexander, who's retiring as a possible flippable vote. Alexander, you know, the statements that he's made suggest that he's going to back McConnell's play. So, you know, I can't see into the future. Maybe a miracle happens and a 4th vote materializes, but it does not seem likely.
How long does this process usually take? Because we only have a few weeks here until the election, right?
So normally it takes about 2 or 3 months to fill a Supreme Court vacancy. I suspect that this one is going to move much quicker. It's not entirely clear whether it's going to happen before or after the election, but I think a lot is going to depend on what individual senators want to do. There might be some senators in close races who would prefer not to cast this vote until after that race has happened. So we don't know yet whether it's going to be before or after the election.
So potentially senators who might get voted out of office in November would still have a vote on this Supreme Court nominee?
Yeah, no, this is one of the worst things about our Constitution, is that after a party has lost power, it still holds on to it for a few months. And so we conceivably could have a situation where Joe Biden wins in a landslide, where Democrats pick up 5, 6, 7 seats in the Senate, and yet the lame duck Republican majority confirms a justice even though Republicans have just been repudiated at the polls.
So this will be potentially President Trump's 3rd Supreme Court nomination in his one term. What do we know about how he picks judges? White dudes?
So far it's been white dudes. I mean, this time he said he's going to pick a woman.
Because I actually like women much more than I like men, I have to say.
I will say this about Trump. So Trump has largely delegated his judicial selection process to conservative groups like the Federalist Society and to lawyers aligned with the Federalist Society. It's a very professional operation. I mean, it picks very, very right-wing individuals, very ideological. The operation that picks them is very efficient. It's made up of committed ideologues who are very good at identifying other committed ideologues to sit on the bench. And because Trump has largely delegated this process to conservative operatives, it doesn't have the sort of goonish incompetence that pretty much everything else in the Trump White House has.
And do we know who he might choose? Does he have a short list?
So I think it's overwhelmingly likely to be a judge named Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett is a favorite of the religious right. She's been very outspoken against abortion.
I don't think the core case, the Roe's core holding that, you know, women have a right to an abortion, I don't think that would change. But I think the question of whether people can get very late-term abortions, you know, how many restrictions can be put on clinics, I think that would change.
She's made some statements suggesting that she's likely to strike down the Affordable Care Act. You know, she would be an extraordinarily conservative judge, or justice. She's already a judge. There are a handful of other names I've seen floated. Barbara Lagoa on the 11th Circuit, Allison Rushing on the 4th Circuit. Allison Rushing, by the way, was a year below me in law school. She's 38 years old. So, like, a lot of these people just don't have very much experience. You know, I'm like, the reason to pick someone like Rushing is that she's young and she'd be there for 60 years.
Yeah.
But I think that it's overwhelmingly likely to be Amy Coney Barrett, and she's also very young. She's 48 years old.
So either way, this justice that Trump picks is going to be on the court for a long time. What sort of shift might they create in sort of the current ideology of the Supreme Court?
So Chief Justice John Roberts has been the center of power at the Supreme Court since Justice Kennedy's retirement in 2018. And Roberts is really, really conservative. but he also believes in procedural regularity. There's a certain institutionalist streak to him. He hates stupid arguments. He hates transparently partisan arguments. There was a case recently where Donald Trump tried to add, or the Trump administration tried to add a question to the census. The sole purpose of this question was to prevent immigrant communities from, or at least discourage immigrant communities from participating in the census and skew the count towards white Republicans. The Trump administration lied about why they put that question on the census, and John Roberts said, you can't lie. You know, like at the very least, you're not allowed to just make stuff up. And there were 4 dissenters in that case. So if Barrett or some other Trump nominee is confirmed, there will probably be 5 people for the proposition that the President of the United States is allowed to lie and get away with it. It's not just there's a lot of individual cases like, you know, Obamacare is in jeopardy. You're going to see broader religious exemptions. It's that there's probably going to be 5 votes. They'll just take transparently partisan, sloppy, poorly crafted arguments and say, that's fine.
Democrats don't have the votes, but there is maybe one thing they can do. More with Ian after a break.
Of consumers for stability at 4
with Google Tools first.
Ian, it seems to me like Republicans are maybe just a little bit better at playing this game. They managed to, you know, never even take a vote on Merrick Garland, a moderate that President Obama chose, and here they are after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal, one could say. They are not even wasting an hour or two to get on with this fight to replace her. Do Democrats have any leverage? Do they have any play here?
Well, first I want to push back a bit against the premise of your question.
Great.
Which is that the problem isn't that Democrats are bad at this. The problem is that the Constitution is rigged against democracy. And I mean, I think it's important to understand, like, we have a president who wasn't elected. He lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. When Merrick Garland was nominated, the Democratic minority represented tens of millions more people than the Republican majority. It's because of malapportionment that Republicans controlled the majority. And now the Democratic minority represents about 15 million more people than the Republican majority. So if we lived in a proper democracy, you know, if the results of our election reflected the preferences of the American people.
A more representative democracy.
Exactly. We would have probably a 6-3 liberal court right now. Hillary Clinton would be president, and we would be talking about which liberal judge Hillary Clinton was about to nominate to the Supreme Court if we lived in a proper democracy.
But we live in a less representative democracy. So in this constitutional republic we got, do Democrats have a play, or is this just a done deal?
So they do have a play. It's a play that probably only works if they win in a landslide.
If they win in this election in a landslide.
Yeah, if they win in November in a landslide, that's correct. So the Constitution says that there has to be a Supreme Court. It doesn't set the number of seats on that Supreme Court.
There may be 14 or 13 or 12.
The number of seats has been as few as 5 in the past, and it's been as many as 10 in the past.
And there may be only 9.
So if Trump's nominee is confirmed, Democrats, if they win a sufficiently large majority, they'd have to nuke the filibuster to do it. But they could pass a law immediately saying that the number of seats on the Supreme Court shall be 13 or 15 or whatever number they want. And then President Biden could immediately nominate people to fill those seats, and then the Senate could confirm them.
Wait a second, Ian, are you talking about court packing?
I am talking about court packing.
I came by a process of elimination to the conclusion that short of amendments, the only method which was clearly constitutional was to infuse new blood into all our courts.
Didn't FDR try this once? And the historical perspective on this is like, FDR was so crazy, he tried to pack the court.
There is nothing novel or radical about this idea.
It is a risky play. So FDR tried court packing. He proposed it in 1937 after the Supreme Court had been striking down a lot of New Deal proposals, and it did not go well for him.
Like all lawyers, like all Americans, I regret the necessity of this controversy.
A lot of people view this, a lot of historians view this as the moment that shattered his coalition. Now, that said, I think there's a lot of things about this moment that are different. So one thing that's different is that there was a very reactionary Supreme Court in the 1930s that FDR had to deal with, but every justice got there fair and square. Like, there was no allegation that the Republican Party had made up some rule to block a Democratic nominee and then had strategically abandoned that rule when it no longer benefited them. Like, everyone on the court in the 1930s had gotten there through a fair, normal process. The other difference is that FDR's coalition already had a lot of hidden fractures in it. There were Southern Democrats who were much more committed to segregation than they were to the New Deal. There were actually Northern and especially Northwestern Republicans who supported the New Deal programs but didn't have any particular love of FDR and were afraid of him consolidating too much power. So it was easier for a hammer to shatter that coalition, whereas now I think Democrats are more united. And if they had a sufficient majority to push through a court packing bill, I think that a lot of them are likely to hold together here.
Court packing, though, it's come to this.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that was completely off the table a week ago. But I think the thing to understand here is that Democrats are in mourning, they are sad, they are pissed. But I think it's also important to remember who Ruth Bader Ginsburg is. If you had asked me 6 months ago, who are the two most revered people amongst elite Democrats in Washington, I would have said John Lewis.
Civil rights leader John Lewis, often called the conscience of the Congress by his colleagues, leaves behind a lifelong legacy of protecting human rights and securing civil liberties.
And Ruth Bader Ginsburg. These are two people who did more than anyone who was alive, or at least who was alive 6 months ago, to achieve the promise of equality in this nation. And the trauma of having this president get to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg under these circumstances where we're coming up on an election and the Merrick Garland thing happened just 4 years ago, I think that might be enough to get Democrats to say enough is enough. We're going to play hardball. We're going to play as hard as we need to play to win. And so, I don't know if every Democrat will sign on to court packing, but if Democrats win a big, big victory, I think that there could be a majority in both houses for it.
Well, Chuck Schumer's the Senate Minority Leader. What does he think about it?
I haven't seen an explicit statement from Chuck Schumer beyond that all options are on the table. Most Democrats are trying very, very hard to say that they're not taking anything off the table, but they're not committing to any specific play forward. The only Senate Democrat that I've seen explicitly come out for court packing is Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts.
So not looking terribly likely.
I mean, it depends. The answer to this is that I think everything depends on the size of the Democratic majority. If there's a 54, 55, 56 senator majority, then I think Democrats could very well have the votes to do this. If there's a 51-seat majority, I think it's very unlikely.
Is it worth asking, what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have wanted here? I know we talked about on our previous show that her granddaughter said that she would have liked that, the next president appoint her replacement. But what would she have thought of something like court packing?
She has in the past spoken out against it.
I think that was a bad idea when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to pack the court.
I don't think it is an ideal outcome if the court is packed. I think it diminishes the legitimacy of the court. I think that Republicans are likely to retaliate with more court packing if they get the chance, and it just winds up destroying the Supreme Court's ability to, have any kind of moral force in this country. The primary benefit of court packing may come from the threat. If Democrats can credibly sell Republicans on the idea that, yes, we will pack the court if you fill this vacancy with a Trump appointee, then I think it's more likely that you get 4 Republican senators to say, you know what, we've already got a 5-justice majority, and that's pretty good. Do we really want to risk losing that?
All right, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ian Millhiser has been writing a lot about what comes next for the Supreme Court. You can find his work at Vox.com. I'm Sean Rameswaram. It's Today Explained.
Okay, guys, it's Carlson and fuck fondant. It is Wednesday. Fondant or fondant?
I like fondant. That feels fun. Because in the end, we're just have terrible takes on cake, so we might as well.
That's right.
Fancy it up.
Cake takes.
Yeah, cake takes.
That's what they come here for. It's Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. My name's Jack O'Brien, a.k.a. Wearing my G-string, making my thighs seem. Get ready to simp, cause they're covered in oil. Wasted away again in Dugaritaville. That is courtesy of Christy Yamagooch, and I'm thrilled to be joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Miles Gray.
Hey, I'm still so high. I'm still so high. That was one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs ever. I just came up with that right now because I didn't have time to check Twitter. I stayed off of it today. But yeah, thank you to my brain and my sense of 90s nostalgia. And Eddie Vedder, obviously, for that.
Yeah. Well, we are thrilled to be joined in our third seat by the hilarious and talented Allison Rosen!
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming
thanks
on.
For being here.
Very excited to be here.
I'm glad so for people who don't listen to Will You Accept This Rose, Allison and I were on a recent episode of that with Arden, who was Monday's guest, and I'm like, let's just take it to the zeitgeist. Let's just keep
That's right.
Let's keep the pods coming. And then you've blessed us with your presence here on our second-rate podcast, so thank you.
Well, let's see if I stay the whole show. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
At a certain point, I might be like, this is just so second-rate.
Yeah.
I only do top-tier shows, but I am interested in talking about fondant or fondant. So
right.
I feel like that bumps you guys up.
What's your feeling on fondant, on cakes? Do you like them, or is it just, it's really for show is our feeling, and we don't like it?
Because do you feel like it's a lie? Sort of like, is it like the fake tits of frosting?
It's a lot of work to eat.
Yeah, it's like chewy. I don't know. It comes off. It's like putting skin on your cake. I don't like it.
That's one way to look at it.
I am gonna come out in favor of it.
Oh,
I do feel like occasionally I have tried to eat some, and I'm like, oh, this is plastic. Maybe this isn't even edible. This is like, that shitty button candy where it's just like dots of
I think they're
sugar.
called dots. Yeah.
No, that's another shitty candy, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Wait, what are the button ones?
Candy is like, you guys might be too young.
Oh, is it the one that's
this.
on the paper?
Yes, it looks like paper from like an adding machine, like an analog adding machine, and then there's like these little
like
dots.
a Scantron form, but it's like psychedelic and rainbow-colored dots on it. Yeah.
But
the shittiest.
You pick it off.
Scantron candy.
Each one has paper on it still, so that can be like fondant. But I don't know. There's something magical about how shiny it is.
They should call that shit rainbow Scantron candy. I did when I was picturing it in my head. I was thinking of that candy, but I was calling it dots. Dots are just are like jelly. What's it called?
Like
jelly
thimbles.
Jellies. Yeah, little thimbles of jelly candy.
Yeah, dots are supposed to be gumdrops without.
Gumdrops.
This came up recently. My podcast is not about snacks. We just talk about snacks a lot. And dots came up on the show because I was polling people to find out, do you think that they're awful or good? And I was shocked at how many people love dots. I've literally never met someone until all of a sudden all these dot fans came out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I don't trust them. I think that's a great first question. We usually open up asking our guests what their search history is and overrated under it. I think we're going to start by asking them what their feelings are on dots.
Yeah,
it tells you a lot about. I mean, that should be something that's in like a dating profile.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Because it's a deal breaker kind of question.
It's sort of it's indicative of like what brings someone pleasure. You know, and I think when you're someone like, whoa, that? I don't know then. I don't know if we're speaking the same language anymore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right. We are going to get to know you a little bit better in a second, Allison. First, we are going to tell our listeners a few of the things we're talking about. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court vacancy. Pat Toomey is probably the senator who seals it. We'll see. We also have, Romney. They're in competition to see who seals it. Either way, we're fucked.
It's weird, because it's still anything. It's 2020. A fucking alien could, Independence Day the Capitol, and we'd be like, I don't know. I guess fucking 2020.
Didn't it seem hopeful for like a second? I feel like there was like a day where it's like, oh, maybe they'll actually be able to. Maybe the Republican... We're not supposed to talk about this yet, right? If we just talk about it later?
It's fine. Yeah, let's talk about it later.
Okay.
But, I
As
know
in, maybe tomorrow. Let's just ignore this. It's kind of overwhelming.
Let's put a pin in this.
All right, let's talk some dots, though, huh?
We're going to ask the question, who could it be now? It's looking like Amy Coney Barrett, depending on how much they... are willing to dig into the People of Praise group. We're going to talk about that. The group she's a part of that is the inspiration.
Don't spoil it.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the
inspiration for a prestige TV show. Which one is it, though?
Which one is it?
You don't know.
You'll find out at 11. We're going to talk about the COVID-19 death toll. We're going to talk... I won't tell you what milestone it's passed, but it sure has passed a milestone. We're going to talk about foods that changed when we weren't looking. General Mills sort of told on themselves about some of our childhood cereals. We'll talk about
Dots.
that. We'll talk about Dots. Not as good as they used to be.
The Dot
We'll talk about
Truther
the
Hour.
FinCEN leak. We'll talk about junk food advertising during the pandemic. All of that, plenty more. But first, Allison, we like to ask our guests, what is something from your search history that is revealing about who you are?
Okay, so my search was portable notebook ad 1990s. And this was one of like 1,400 similar searches. I also did portable brother ad 1980s, portable typewriter ad 1980s, 1990s. I could not find what I was looking for. The reason I was looking for this is the aforementioned Arden Marine, who was just on my podcast. She and I, on email, were talking about a book that I want to write, and she's sort of been helping me just, I don't know, she's been trying to motivate me to, like, just do it, just put it on paper. And I feel like the blank page is daunting, and I feel like I just want to leave it in my brain to, like, marinate right now, which is really just me being lazy. I don't feel like sitting in front of my computer. And I was saying, like, I think my computer is intimidating me right now. I need one of those portable typewriters from the ads in 17 way back when, where like you could take it on a train. And I said more details about the ad that I was talking about, but I wasn't sure if she would remember what I meant. So then I was trying to find an image of this ad, and I can't find it. I am left now to wonder, did I invent this? This is like, oftentimes this will happen to me where I'm like, there was an episode of Facts of Life that was a takeoff of Twilight Zone, right? That's so weird, though. Did I imagine that? And I did not imagine it. It is called Seven Little Indians. So anyway, there was like, I feel like it was sort of like a smart typewriter or something. It was like a Dell typewriter, but it had some kind of computer aspect of it. And I don't think it was the 80s. I think it was the 90s, and it was in either like 17 magazine or Sassy. I read all those magazines, Sassy magazine, and they would show two different people using this, like, I don't know if it was IBM or Toshiba, I don't know what, Brother or Dell or what it was, but two different people and like how it would be incorporated into their life. And it was like on one page and it was split down the middle. And like one person took it on the train and and the other one like went to a cafe.
Help her
but
out,
I cannot find it. So someone listening probably
Are you
knows
sure
it.
it's not the Macintosh one?
What you're describing is more like I would call like a word processor.
Right.
Yes.
The early word
because that's what they would call them back then when like it was a typewriter. It's like, but it had this little tiny screen on it, so it's kind of like a computer. So maybe search word. I don't know. I remember my mom.
I think you're right.
Used to type like her like movie articles like when she was critiquing films like on one of those, and I was like, what the fuck is this thing? It's so weird, and it's like the smallest screen. But yeah, WordPro.
She tell you it was the wave of the future?
Well, in Japanese you call it wapuro, which is a wado processor. So you just basically short condense it. So you like, yeah, that's that wapro right there.
Maybe I should have searched Wapido.
Yeah, or word processor ad, whatever. But yeah, if there's any typist or enthusiasts, archivists, historians, please holler at Allison.
Well, so initially when I typed like portable typewriter ad, these really old vintage ads were coming up, and I was like, "This is not at all
from
what
like
I'm
the
looking
40s."
for.
Like
yes,
yeah. Well, the first time that they sold typewriters that weren't bolted down to like the house that you lived in,
right? They did used to, because I remember my parents had them. They each had one, like his and hers. They must probably like a wedding present or something, and they came in these like big, almost suitcases that you would carry them around, and I'm sure they were super heavy.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember the typewriter my family had when I was growing up came in like a suitcase thing.
Yeah. Also a personal defense weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. What is something you think is overrated?
Oh, I wrote down two of them.
Wow.
One is more frivolous, and one is a little. No, I'll do the more serious one. I personally think doing things really young and being advanced is overrated. I wasn't like Doogie Howser or anything. I was just your average kind of like accelerated kid. I was, in AP classes I was taking some college classes in high school, some high school classes in 8th grade, and it just felt like extra pressure. I feel like if you have the ability to do those subjects, you eventually will get to them. What is the rush? And then also, I wrote for the LA Times when I was 18, which was like a real big feather in my cap. I started writing when I was in high school, and for the longest time I was like the youngest person in any situation I was in, and so much of my identity was kind of shaped around this idea of like being I'm so young to be doing XYZ. But the problem with that, again, I don't want to paint myself out as like I didn't graduate Harvard at 18 or at 14. I also didn't go to Harvard, but I wasn't like one of those people. But I was, younger than everyone.
Yeah, you were the Cameron Crowe of the LA Times.
Yes.
There you go.
But the problem with that is it doesn't last, and then. Eventually, all of a sudden, you're the same age as everyone, and then all of a sudden, everyone's younger than you, and it can mess you up. So, I just think that whole thing is overrated because it sets you up to then have trouble transitioning into, like, just being of average age.
Right, yeah. Having adult mediocrity.
Yeah.
Sort of like,
Yeah, my wife was a musical prodigy when she was young, and I think it totally turned her off of music. She was playing Carnegie Hall when she was 7, and
wow,
the whole trick was look how young she is.
The whole trick? What do you mean? It was like a flea circus?
It's just a flea circus.
Yeah. She wasn't playing; it was a computer doing all the work.
No, that's not. She was an amazing musician, but then
it was actually a chicken playing a piano behind her.
Right.
That's the real gag, and they didn't even show the chicken.
But I remember her friends from high school when they met me. They were like, "You haven't seen her play the piano or the violin," because she just kind of got burnt out early.
Right.
I think that also happens.
Right.
And also, I feel like that one relates to people right now who feel like their life is stalled because of the pandemic, which I think is everyone. And also if you have kids doing remote learning and all that, and these concerns about like what's going to happen there off track, it'll be okay.
Yeah, they'll figure it out. Yeah. I think you have young children too, right?
I do. Yeah, I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old.
Yeah, I have a 4 and a 2. And
you have 4 and 2?
Yeah.
So they're like the same ages. It is tough.
One of the best things I heard early on was like when we were worried about our older boy like being potty trained, and one of these like child experts was like, yeah, you know what? I don't know too many kids who like got to high school and still were not potty trained. You'll be fine. I was like, okay, that's a longer time frame. I feel better now.
What? High school?
Yeah. Did you not get it by then? I mean, college, definitely. I actually went backwards in college because I was drinking so much.
Well, to Allison's point, I think doing things so early is a little overrated. I'm still on my potty journey.
Right. But you have pull-ups, and I've always been impressed by that.
Yeah, well, they're fucking sick as fuck because they have I got them in like designer prints now. So they're cool.
Yeah. Allison, what is something you think is underrated?
I feel like this is a real basic kind of thing, but I think just one of those heat pads that you plug in is underrated. I think not enough people talk about loving a heat pad. Every night, I plug mine in, I turn it up, and I get in bed, and I put it on my abdomen, but really I could put it anywhere, and I feel super snuggly and comfy and cozy, and it like instantly relaxes me. Now, some people don't like to be warm, but I do, and I find that it's just like, sometimes if I'm feeling super stressed, I'll just turn on it. This is painting such a pathetic picture of me, but I also enjoy an electric heated throw, and I'll just sometimes back in the day when I traveled, I would even travel with it. I just find it like totally makes me feel secure and relaxed. It's like a weighted blanket.
I was going to say, do you like a weighted blanket too?
I don't own one.
Right.
Do you like getting gentle x-rays?
No, that's the thing. I've been told that it's like that, and I'm kind of neutral on the lead apron.
Right, you're a heat person, less of a lead person.
Yeah, heat person, less of a weight person. But full disclosure, I was supposed to receive a weighted blanket because they were a sponsor on my show, and it accidentally got sent to the wrong office, and then I was told it would be forwarded to me, and it never was. I imagine because the postage of a weighted blanket is just too much.
Costs 30
insurmountable.
Pounds. Yeah, they're like, what do you want me to fucking do with this?
How do you guys feel about them? Weighted blankets?
I love a weighted blanket. One of my cats peed on it recently, so I gotta do a whole thing there to remove that wonderful scent. But I love it. We also, full disclosure, we did an ad for one as well, and I love a dental x-ray. I love, I just love the feeling of it. Yeah, just want to crush my chest. I think I made a Crucible reference when we were doing the ad.
Yeah. I think one of the things that they asked us not to emphasize, but I think I can talk about now, great babysitter for children who are like 1 to 2. You just like throw that thing on top of them.
They're good,
and
man.
They're good. Yeah, they'll eventually fall asleep.
They get tuckered up.
Am I right? You guys are a weighted blanket podcast, right? Am I right that they're kind of all small, though? Or is it like full body size?
Full body.
Full body, the one we did, yeah. And I went a little too overboard with the weight to the point where I was like, it's comfy, but like a little too much. Like my partner was like trying to get it off. He's like, you weren't breathing. And I was like, oh my god, it was a lot. But the thing about I love in Japan, we keep talking about Japan, is like heated carpets are a thing in the winter, where you'd put this basically carpet-sized heating pad underneath your carpet. So like, because you slid on the floor a lot in Japan, so you just have this nice heated carpet. I want to bring that vibe like to my home, but it's just so hot. Like there's no need for it. But there's just something comforting about just like laying on an entirely hot rug too.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I need that in my life.
In-laws who are Korean are way into heated blankets, heated everything.
All heated.
I've noticed that just like overseas, like heated towel racks are almost like very common, like much more common. I think heated things just in general are less common in the United States. And
this just shows how
just
cultured, elegant, and worldly I am, and I didn't even know.
I know,
right, exactly.
Exactly. What is a myth? What is something people think is true you know to be false? Or vice versa, something false.
I think there's this idea. I had this idea that in order to get pregnant, all you have to do is stop preventing pregnancy. DARE and sex ed and safe sex and all that was so, like, beaten into my brain. That sounds more violent, but I just mean I grew up so afraid of all the things that come with sex that I was like so, the idea of not practicing safe sex was just, I couldn't even imagine it. Like, the first time I had sex, I took a pregnancy test, even though we also used condoms. This is too much information, but I just was so afraid of it. I really expected that, like, the minute I try to get pregnant, I will get pregnant because it's, and for me, it was so much more difficult. I didn't even consider the idea that it might be, that it just isn't going to be super easy. And I've been very public about it on my show. We ended up doing IVF for both my kids. So it took a whole team of scientists and a lot of money in order for me to get pregnant. So that I don't want to be, lest anyone young be listening to this, it might be super easy for you to get pregnant.
Right.
So it still is easy for a lot of people. For me, it was not.
Yeah.
And judging from the standing room only crowd at the fertility clinic, for a lot of women, it is not.
Right. Yeah.
Those like sex abstinence talks that, because I went to like a Lutheran like middle school where, first of all, they showed us the most dated fucking footage of anything. Like, I didn't know what my own penis looked like based on what they were showing me. I was like, what the fuck is this? It looks like a cross section of like a Pringles can. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck we're looking at. So they did us a disservice there. And then I think, but also like the big like awareness around safe sex also kind of swung my pendulum the other way, where I was very concerned about like any kind of sexually transmitted diseases and things like that. I was always like, no, we always wear condoms. I was like, my friends who like, even in college, they would be in committed relationships and like not using condoms. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, good luck, bro. We'll see how that goes. And like, we've been together for 3 years. I'm like, well, I still have this teacher's voice ringing in my ear that all it takes is one time.
Same.
All right, guys, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk about the news.
A ravenous pandemic, a ruinous recession, protests, riots, racial strife, police brutality, and yes, Donald Trump. America.
What's good, guys? We did it. We listened to the news, we did our yoga, a whole episode of Today Explained, and just a little bit of zeitgeist. All we need now is an affirmation. To have an amazing fucking day, or not to have an amazing fucking day. Noodle, don't noodle. You're too worried about what once was and not what will be. However, there's a saying, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why they call it the present. Guys, thank you so much for joining. I'm gonna have an amazing fucking day. Natty, I'm so sorry about the camera. Forgive me. And hi, Amon. I hope you're having a good day so far. I will see you tomorrow at 9. As for the rest of you, I'll see you when I see you.